All set. Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's so many good friends, so many new friends, so many folks from my weekly Zoom calls and just people that I know. So it's just fabulous. And I have to tell you, I guess my goal really is to make sure that people only go through your in transition program once. And then they've learned to bulletproof their career so that they never have to be in transition again. And the things that I teach really emanate from my career as a single mom. I started my career in sales, then I went into retained search, and now into bulletproof coaching. And the things that I teach are things that I did because as a single mom, I really couldn't afford to be in transition, and everything that I did. And I want you to understand that I did it without LinkedIn. I did it without, this is how old I am. I did it without LinkedIn. I did it without email. I did it mostly keeping in touch and doing the things that I talk about by phone and by snail mail. So if I could do there, the things that we'll talk about here, I've tried to put together, I'm going to give you a little glimpse in a minute of some of the information, just a snapshot from my TED Talk, because it really will frame why I'm so passionate about teaching what I teach. I'm going to give you some overview of a big picture view of the 7 things that on a big picture I need you to be thinking about in order to be bulletproof. And then I'm going to give you some more practical, tactical things also. So I'm really excited about this. I want to explain for those of you who are saying, what is this all bulletproof and never being in transition again? Here's the concept. If you do the right things once you land, if you learn in the process of landing and do the right things once you land and maintain them, not at the same level that you have to when you're in transition or you would just scream, but at a very strategic approach at the right level, you should, by the time you're being disrupted, and you'll see in my slides, it's going to happen again. By the time you're being disrupted, you already have many opportunities set up that you could go to continue your career someplace else without any interruption. Tenny and I were talking about, I connected back there when I was in Orange County, and I worked for an executive search firm when I eventually started my own. But I will also tell you that I was doing this bulletproof, starting my own and having 3 backup plans with other firms in case I didn't make it on my own or decided not to do it. So I always was ready to be ready. And that's the whole point of today. So let me get to my slides. I should be able to share the screen. Yeah. Walk you through, and there's some news items now that make this even more timely. And yes, that is my imitation of Pat Benatar that my photographer decided to do. So I want to teach you how to bulletproof your career for life and become the CEO of your career, right? So I want you to know that my mantra for everybody is that you must fundamentally change your relationship to your career. And I'm going to give you some very specific information about how to do that. I also want to tell you that a lot of times, people will speak and say, I don't want to scare anybody. That's not me today. I do want to scare you because I have to shake things up enough for you to know how important it's going to be to fundamentally change your relationship to your career, because corporate America changed its relationship with you a long time ago. And this is a quote. It happened to be in a very recent issue of Fast Company, but basically it's saying, look, there was a tipping point at which companies who had originally promised that if you came and you did a good job and you were loyal to them, that they would be loyal to you. And they had a pension for you. They had a way for you to have a great exit, and they weren't getting disrupted all the time. They didn't need to be disrupted. But once they made the decision that the shareholders or board members or investors, if it's not a public company, once they made that decision, then the whole social contract that they had with their employees changed. And it was very subtle. They didn't exactly rip it up in front of you, but as time has gone on, it has been shredded little by little. Again, not because of a lot of evildoers, there may be a few of those out there, but mostly because the disruption that's going on makes it impossible for them to not do that. So this is the trickiest part about rethinking your career. And this is probably one of the cruelest parts about this social contract that's changed, is that in past performance, no matter how great, is not a guarantee of future employment anymore. That was not the case that used to be, but that is the case today, without a doubt. There's probably many of you here, and if you listen to my whole TED Talk, you will hear a couple of, at least the very first case study is tragic but true. People who on this call or know people who made tremendous contributions. And just as you finished it, just as they launched that new product, they said, now we're going in a different direction, and boom, you're gone. So you have to shift your mindset and accept the fact that you need to maintain these activities because your performance isn't going to save you. You need to think of yourself as a free agent. You're the CEO of your career, and you must change your habits because habits affect our impact, right? So I just want to walk you through a little bit, as I mentioned, of the TED Talk, not the whole thing, but just some key points. The average tenure of S&P 500 companies on the S&P 500 was 33 years in 1965. That's when they were giving out gold watches. That's when you would stay there for 25 years. You'd ride off into the sunset. You'd go down to the beach and you'd be good to go. That changed. Let me show you how it changed. In 1990, it dropped to 20 years, 13 years difference. Now, those 25-year gold watches were fewer and far between, right? And by 2027, just 5 years from now, it's projected that it will be 12 years. I did this TED Talk in 2018. I have struggled. I have not been able to find a more recent statistic for this, but from what I'm seeing out there, I would suggest that is probably conservative, because I do track how the companies are at the top 12 of the S&P 500, and they're flying off of there faster than they ever have, right? So what does that mean? Well, if the companies are being disrupted that much, then you're being disrupted. Their employees are being disrupted. The industries are being disrupted. So here's the latest statistics, again, on tenure. Again, I think that they have not done this again since January 2020 because of COVID. And I'm hoping that this gets updated. But even still, just watch the trend. So when I did my TED Talk in 2018, the first number there, so for example, for the CEO was 8 years. When these stats came out, it had already dropped to 6.9 years. For the CFO, it went from 5.1 to 4.7. For the CHRO, from 5 years to 3.7, a really dramatic drop off. CIO, it looks like it went up. Good, 4.3 to 4.6, unless you're in the healthcare sector. And in Orange County, a lot of people in the healthcare sector. And in the healthcare sector, the average went to 3.9 years. And the CMO has the shortest C-suite tenure at 4.1 year, was 4.1 and now 3.5. And I will tell you from my coaching work and from what I see out there, I predict that the role of CMO will be one that will be in the history book. It is changing to chief digital officer, chief revenue officer. That whole ombudsman role of CMO is changing dramatically. And I predict that that's why you're seeing that run down like that. Okay, so there's some disruption that just happened in real time, and it's very timely. For those of you, again, who read my TED Talk or listened to my TED Talk, you know that I use Netflix as one of the poster children for going in and disrupting Blockbuster. Blockbuster, fat, dumb, and happy. We have a retail store. Come get your videos. Netflix says, no, we're going to mail them to them. So that's great. Disrupted, put Blockbuster out of business virtually overnight. And I have done additional longer workshops with this content. And in those workshops, I talk frequently about, hey, it's only a matter of time before Netflix gets disrupted. Well, it's happened. It happened on April 21st of this year. And actually on April 22nd, the stock had dropped to 40%, right? So if you're sitting inside Netflix and you're great, you've got these great shows, everybody's talking about watching Netflix, and all of a sudden your stock plunges by 35%. And actually 40, that's going to have an impact. They haven't, I will tell you that it is a very people cultured environment. So I know that they will do a lot of things first, but the shareholders are not going to let them not fix this problem. And they can't fix it on the upside soon enough. They're going to have to fix it by disrupting on the downside. And here's a quote from that article that said, what worked until this point may not be working anymore. The world's changed. this quote could fit so many companies and so many situations where you've seen disruption. This is what happens, right? And here's the velocity of disruption. So we have a billionaire that invested in Netflix, 1.1 million bet on Netflix. And how long did his bet last? 3 months. He took his money off the table the minute it started to drop. That's the kind of disruption. There's other places that he wants to put his money, and he just stripped it out like that. So it's real-time disruption that I talk about in my TED Talk, okay? So the smart companies are always ready to be ready, and you need to be too. The Toys R Us of the world was not ready to be ready. Boom, they were gone. They've got a little vignette. I actually am coaching a person who's helping them redo what they're doing. But for the most part, they disappeared for a bit. So this is about helping you understand how to be ready to be ready. So when I talk about being a gigger for life, let me frame this in the way that I try to describe it in my TED Talk. I don't want you all to go out and be Uber drivers, for sure. I don't even want you to necessarily, you can always have a side gig. That's awesome. You can always think of another stream of revenue. That's great. But my main point is this, that there is a way that giggers act, and there is a way that giggers think as a 1099 employee that is very different from the typical mindset of how a corporate executive has thought in the past. And sometimes you look to another group of people in order to learn something that will help you. And I would suggest that if you start to look at the way giggers have managed their careers throughout their life, it will help you be better able to manage your career and start to fundamentally change your relationship. So giggers cultivate a very broad community, especially in emerging sectors and industries, whereas corporate executives tend to create a cocoon of connections. And that cocoon of connections can be in their own department, in their own division, and yet there may be opportunities on the other side of the world, on the other side of the United States, in other divisions of their company, where there's something being disrupted on the West Coast, and it's something new being created on the East Coast, right? But when you're in this cocoon of connections and you have your head down, not looking for that, you haven't got the context. So let me put this into a real life discussion that I had at my TED conference. I also led a tabletop discussion. And at that tabletop in 2018, there were 10 people, all from Home Depot, because Atlanta, right? And I went around the table and I said, so tell me what part of the company, you work in. And they all said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, retail or online. And they said, oh, retail, all 10. And I said, great. Okay. I said, so tell me, what do you know about the online part of your company? And they all looked and said, nothing. Like, why would we? We're working over here in retail. I said, well, let me tell you something. The online part of Home Depot is growing at just over 20% right now. The retail part of Home Depot is growing by barely 5%. So where do you think Home Depot is hiring, and where do you think they're putting their money? And I said, you need to find the people in retail, in online, that need to know you and that you need to know, because I said, have you looked at the postings? No, head down, not looking at the postings, just knowing the people in my department. And guess what happened? 2020, 80% of Home Depot's revenue, when they reported it at the end of I think it was the end of 2020, early 21, was coming from online, because people were remodeling like crazy and not going to the store, right? So it was just a really good example of, if I'm a gigger, I'm working in finance, but I'm talking to somebody and saying, are they doing any transformation in marketing? Is there anything going on over there? I'm always looking for crumbs of other activity. That's the way I want you to be thinking. So you need to be open for variety. As giggers are, they're open for a variety of gigs, and you need to do a great job in your current role. And you say, well, wait a minute, Pat, you just told me that doing a great job isn't going to buy me anything. It is. It's going to buy you some really great bullet points for your resume. That's one thing it's going to buy you, because when you go in the interview, you want to be talking about your accomplishments and the impact you made and why your work mattered. So you have to have that. And at the end of the day, I have a whole onboarding program for folks that I'm working with for 12 months. And we're making sure that they're making an impact in that role, because I want that. I don't want any noise over there. I want them to be able to focus on other things. So this is a big part. Well, giggers, so what do? They do that project, and they do that project really well so that they can talk to the department manager 3 departments over and say, hey, you should talk to Joe over there. I just finished up a consultation program with him, and he'll tell you what a great job I did. But this is not the norm for most executives in a corporate environment, right? So you're open to gigs. And when I'm saying open to gigs, I'll give you a classic example. Right this moment, I have a client in Dallas, and there's a lot of disruption going on in her company. They've already had 3 changes at the top, because if you look back at those statistics where I said, the CEO is only there for this long and the CFO this long, and you may be sitting there going, well, thank God I'm not in the C-suite, because those guys are going to get, kicked to the curb so quickly. Guess what? When those folks are disrupted at the top, it disrupts everything, right? So she's experiencing that. So they came to her, and they've made all these changes, and they said, we have nobody else. We'd like you to take on marketing. She doesn't want to take on marketing. She's already done everything. I said, we're going to take on marketing because it's going to keep them quiet. You're going to do what you have to do in marketing. They're not going to expect great things because they've already given you 2 other more additions, but it's going to keep the noise away so that we can work very diligently on our plan to get her out of there before anything else happens inside that company, right? So, actively seeking ways to stand out. You know what? Giggers go around and say, hey, talk to Tom. Hey, Tom, can I get a testimonial? Hey, Tom, would you talk to Mary over there and tell her how I did? They are their own one-man band public relations group, right? And they're looking for ways to stand out. They're looking for ways to lead a panel discussion. They're looking for ways to be a speaker so that they can get their brand out there, right? But corporate America has done a really good job of teaching people to be quiet and to not take the spotlight and not to be looking for that, right? And if they tap you for something, that's one thing, but don't you dare be standing out. But you need to make sure that people know what you've done and know the impact that you've made without it being kind of grandstanding. But if you're the best kept secret, and so many of the people that I end up coaching have had that career where, I never really took credit. I never stood out. I never got any attention for the impact we made. You've got to have that so that you stand out. And again, it's so that maybe in another division or department, you really need your own little PR team inside, yourself heading it up, so that 3 states over, they hear about this wonderful program that you did, and they said, I'm going to go get that person and bring them over here because that's our next great frontier, right? And I want to stress when I'm talking about this, hopefully you get the understanding of, I am not saying that you always have to leave your current company in order to be bulletproof, but you have to leave the cocoon of comfort that you sit in your department or your division in order to be safe. Let me give you another good practical example of this. There was a HR person from Turner Broadcasting that was at my TED Talk. And the spring after I did my TED Talk, she reached out to me and she said, I want you to come into Turner and do your TED Talk. And I said, did you hear my TED Talk? Because it's not exactly kumbaya for corporate America, right? And she said, yes, I did. And you're absolutely right. And we're sitting here with Time Warner, AT&T, we're being disrupted all over the place. We have all these really great people, and they're walking around thinking that Ted Turner is going to come back in here and save them. And he's not. I need them to understand that they need to be showcasing themselves to Time Warner, showcasing themselves to AT&T and standing out, because I can see really great people who are not going to make it because they're not doing that, right? So even inside that idea of if you are, there's an acquisition in a company, you want to be sure that those acquired have some way of knowing that you stood out and that you're one of the keepers to stay in there. And again, if there's one division shrinking and one growing, that the one that's growing wants to tap somebody who's already inside and proven that you can work in the culture, and they need you, right? So this is the number one skill for this century, period, end of story, is the ability to adapt to change. There are people at Netflix that are going, what just happened? And there are people that will adapt. There are people that will hunker down. There are people that will go, I know we're going to have to, we're going to get through this. And there are other people walking around shell-shocked. And it's the people, I can tell you that in my corporate career, there was definitely in meetings, and I'll back up and tell you that discussion about the social contract, one of the big perpetrators of the disruption of the social contract was Carl Icahn. And I personally worked for Carl Icahn. I know how to adapt to change. It was daily, right? And I was nimble and able to do that. And I also know colleagues who wouldn't adapt to change and said, but we don't do that this way. This is the way we do it here. And they were gone in a heartbeat because things had to change. So if you're looking at, unfortunately, I wish there was a certification for agility and ability to adapt to change. There's certainly books about it. There's certainly lots of ways to gain the skill. But when people are running around being certified for things, this is the thing that's going to make you most retainable inside of a company, because they know you can be that all around player versus that specialty. If you're just the kicker for that one from 52 yards into the goalpost, not as practical as the all around player, right? And really take ownership of your and control of your destiny. So a lot of people come to me and say, you know, Pat, this is so foreign to me to be in transition. I worked, 15 years here, 20 years here, 18 years here. And, my manager, whenever they moved on or ever they got promoted, they always took me with them. And then they retired, or they just gave up, or they went to someplace I couldn't go. And I don't know where to begin. I don't have a network. I don't have that contact. And that was my conduit, right? But when you say, wait a minute, corporate America, my company is only going to keep me as long as they need me. That's really the guarantee that's out there. As long as we need you, you got a job. And when we don't need you, you don't. So you have to take control of your destiny. And I am going to show you other ways to do that, right? This is certainly something that giggers do, right? For sure. They know that every day they have to get up and create more, the next opportunity, the next gig that's going to get them paid. I need you to really focus on engaging in self-directed learning that serves both you and your current job and your future gigs. And I'm going to give you some very specific and tactical things here. So here's the problem. Guess what? Inside of Toys R Us, for years before Toys R Us was disrupted out of existence, everybody who worked there they had a learning and development department. And guess what they were teaching them to do? Essentially, still it distilled down to, they were teaching them how to put boxes of toys on a shelf. In the meantime, while they were learning how to do that very effectively and efficiently in all the ropes of retail, while they were inside those stores and warehouses doing that, outside there were these big brown trucks driving by with boxes full of toys from Amazon that was disrupting the folks that were in there. So companies are, of course, going to focus their learning and development on things that are going to benefit them. But you need to be looking out to the horizon and make sure that you are learning what's not just going to be new for your job. But for example, I coach a lot of folks from Manhattan who were in the big banking business, right? They really got blindsided by the surge of the fintech industry. And some of those are being blindsided by the surge of the Bitcoin and all of the alternate currencies that are coming about, right? They were not looking ahead at that. They were looking at the bank and what it was doing, and certainly there were enough disruptions there, but not looking at those future fintech gigs and not therefore ready when that was the movement that was where the trending was happening, right? And you need to build your own 401me plan, right? So when you are in transition, you have two runways. One runway is your emotional runway. For some people, that runs out 24 hours after you find out that you're not working. For some, it takes a little bit. Sometimes it takes a month or two of frustration. But I will tell you this, that the emotional runway, even though I want you to have a great safety net here and a great financial runway, the emotional runway is, in every instance that I've coached anybody, has been shorter than the financial runway. But I do want you to know that this is what giggers do. They have to have their own. I've got 6 months of compensation in the bank so that if something happens and I can't get that next gig, I've got that income. You have to have that independence. Companies will lure you into their 401k plan, which can be very nice, and they match it, and that's all good. But if you don't hold out a little piece of that you put somewhere that it's liquid, so that there is no penalty for taking it, that there's access, and you sit there and say, I have options. I have that nest egg over here, and not just be counting on that 401me plan, right? So important. Okay. So I want to get a little bit practical here. So there's some scenarios that might be very familiar to you, right? So taking charge requires that you accept today two critical facts. The rules have changed. The social contract is broken. They had to break it because they're getting disrupted right, left, and center. And you have to accept the fact that the rules have changed. No one is ever going to care as much about your career as you. I don't care how many times they discuss it in your annual reviews. I don't care how many times they sit down and say, we're really concerned about you, and we will be concerned about you until something changes here. And then all bets are off, right? So I don't want everybody to turn cynical, but when you're listening to all of the succession planning and all of the wonderful journey that you're going to take inside that company, I want you to know, you go, that's good, but I have to take charge of my career too, because if you're not here tomorrow, what am I going to do, right? This takes a major mindset shift. Most of my work, even the whole chapter of my book, so many of my workshops is really about mindset. And I'm going to explain to you, I know firsthand how hard this mindset shift is, because if you have been in corporate America for longer than a nanosecond, they have taught you to be very loyal to them. That loyalty pays great dividends to them, for sure. I think the hardest conversation I ever had, but just to show you that mindset can be changed, I was coaching an ex-West Point grad who was also in a special forces unit. So, comrade, loyalty to the military, loyalty to his comrades, right? And he took that, went into corporate America, and just embraced the loyalty to corporate America. When he reached out to me, he said, well, here's what I did. They hired me for this role 2 years ago. Little did I know what the setup was. I did exactly what they needed. And out of the blue, acquisition, 2 days later, I'm gone. His two boys that were getting ready for college, a nice house in Carolinas, and he was gone just like that. And the hardest conversation I had with him was to get him to see that his loyalty belonged to himself, his family, his children, his wife, and their well-being, not to the company, beyond your social contract to say, I go to work, I do my job, I do a good job, I strive to accomplish the goals that you have for me, but my loyalty has to be where family, or he had obviously a direct family, has to be with yourself and your family. This requires development of unshakable confidence. So when I talk about back there about the importance of learning to accept change, when I talk back there about kind of the other shifts that you have, this mindset shift and loyalty, and I talk about being able to adapt to change, the other piece of this is this unshakable confidence. Because when you're inside a role, if you do not have confidence, you don't believe you have options. And believe me, there are very good managers who don't want you to think you have any options outside of their needs until they don't need you, which is what happens, right? I coached somebody who came to me devastated, and she said, I took the role, I was promised a promotion over and over again, and it never came. But I kept saying, but they promised it to me, and I can't, take this experience anywhere else. I'm not going to get any better anywhere else. And they finally came to her one day and they said, we're going to give you a promotion. Your promotion's effective immediately. And they elevated her up and they put her picture on the website, and she was so excited. And she was, strangely enough, you might not be shocked by this, she was the only female on the website. So now there was a lot of men on the website, and then she was on the website, and she was so proud and so excited. And 2 months later, the company sold. And why was she the only woman on the website? Because they didn't have any diversity. And it was a problem as they were trying to sell the company. And she did not know that. And when they promoted her and said, we have a female executive, and there she is on the website, and you should buy us. And they did. And she was out of the job as soon as the deal was completed. And she sat there and said, if I had the confidence, I would have taken my skill before I got my legs cut out from under me, right? And this is going to require replacing old habits with new habits. Required reading for people in my Onboard to Bulletproof course is a book called Atomic Habits. I'm sure anybody who follows me knows it, but I'm sure it's been like one of the top books for the last couple of years. It is such a fabulous book for getting in step with what I'm teaching you, because you can't take 15, 20 years of habits that have been created and beliefs that have been honed for you by this world that has changed and change it overnight. And Atomic Habits is really about doing tiny little things that, and what it will do is convince yourself that you have made a decision to take responsibility for yourself and your career, and to always be ready to be ready. So those little habits give testimony to your mindset that, you know what, I know now no one is ever going to take as much care of my career as me, and I'm taking charge. So taking charge requires a few things. I was talking back there about knowing what's going on outside. And this is one of the things that I think is so easily neglected and yet so easily fulfilled on the other hand, which is it requires a commitment to consistently paying attention to what's happening in your industry and adjacent industries. I was coaching somebody from Citibank, and they said, for the last 3 years, they have very quietly been closing down little departments here and moving them to Texas, to San Antonio. And guess what? All the back office for much of the banking industry moved south. And people were so busy, head down, doing the work that they had to do for the big banks that it didn't really hit them. And then all of a sudden they went, you know what? They've outsourced all of that. And all of those leadership roles in operations and back office operations in the bank left too. And even though some of them had their departments going, that's a big bank, many buildings. They just didn't see the trend, right? What's happening in emerging industries? There's a wonderful list. And let me tell you how quickly this disruption is going on. There's a list that I talk about in my TED Talk, which is the unicorns list. Those are companies that have risen overnight virtually to $1 billion in valuation. It started with the Airbnb and the Uber, and you saw those come up. Well, when I did my TED Talk, there were about 200 companies at the time, just in 2018, not that long ago, that were part of the unicorns. In March of last year, the most recent report so far, the list came out, there were 600 and about 638, I can't remember the exact number, over 600 companies that were now classified as unicorns. So look at the growth, over 400 companies, boom, burst on the scene. And every single one of those unicorns is nibbling at the heels of some established company and stealing revenue from them, stealing market share from them, stealing people from them. That's happening every day. I'm going to give you some follow-up, including this document and another PDF, some things for you as follow-up, Christy, and I'll give them so you can put them in a Dropbox and hand them out. I will also include, it's a list from CB Insights that I was able to download, and I'll include that list, and it's the unicorns, and you can sort by industry and sector. And when you're inside of a role, you want to know, okay, we know who our direct competitors are most of the time, but sometimes if you're not in a department where that has to be first and foremost on your mind, and you're already working 60 hours a week, you may not be paying attention to that. Maybe strategy is, but you're not. So you want to always know what's coming out there and what the emerging companies are. And when you go through that list, you'll see by industry category which industries are dominating that list. And a side note, the good thing about that list is that it lists the VCs that are investing in those. So now you know what VCs are aimed at what of these emerging sectors and industries, and you can work your networking into those, right? So what's happening in your own company, right? So we talked about what was happening at Home Depot, and little, I mentioned, so one of the requirements of my onboarding people is that they get to know anybody who's in charge of innovation and strategy inside their company. Take them to lunch, get on a Zoom call, buy them a present, because they know where the company's going, and they can kind of nothing that is confidential, but directionally you can learn a lot from those, right? Know what's happening in your life. Are you reaching a point where all of this, I'm just coaching somebody right now who was with Apple and launched the Apple Card. So Apple Pay and Apple Card, big launch for Apple, right? And she was hungry over and over again for more of those, intense, 800-hour a week, getting these things down. And she just said, you know what's happening in my life? My daughter needs me. that's what's happening in my life. I need not to do that anymore. I need to take all this talent and go someplace different and use it differently. So know what's happening in your life now and what you see in your life for the future, and make up your mind about what you want to happen in your life, which is exactly what she and I are working on right now. And here's the thing, a minimum of 1 hour per quarter to assess what's the current state in all of these things is going to make you a more informed person inside your company, but it's going to help you know, these are some companies that I should have on my perpetual target list. These are some companies that I should be connecting to people in there. They might be very interested in me this year, next year, or the year after. So when you think about the hours that you spend when you're in transition, pounding the pavement, pounding the computer versus 1 hour per quarter to do this, I always try to break it down to little habits that you can do. This is something that for my students and my clients, they have this scheduled on their calendar. Once they land, we have it scheduled on their calendar for the rest of the year. 1 quarter per year. This is what they're going to, 1 hour per quarter, just for this, so that what gets scheduled gets done, right? So taking charge also requires a self-created development plan that includes skills to keep you ahead in your area of expertise and skills that you will need in the future, right? So you have to have that future picture to know what skills will be required. I can tell you probably the biggest area where this impacted was so many people who were in marketing, traditional marketing, branding, traditional marketing, all of this. And all of a sudden they're in transition and every job says, well, how much digital marketing experience have you had? And they said, none. How much content? And I'm talking about now, even a few years back, how much content creation were you doing? I never got involved in that. I was over here and they didn't have what they needed for the jobs that were there, right? And understanding of the workforce of the future. There's so many books I have recommendations for on that, and just articles, right? And going in to say, Google is your friend. What is the future of supply chain, workforce for the supply chain? And Googling that and seeing these are the things that are going to be needed. And you can do that with any single area of expertise. And then these vital and way too often neglected areas, confidence and imposter syndrome, perfectionism and its close cousin, all related, procrastination, thinking on your feet, being nimble and agile, honing your personal brand, overthinking, eliminating overthinking, not learning to overthink better. That's not what I'm getting at. Relationship building and priority management, because you're going to there's more coming at you faster, as you all know. And all of those, what you might consider soft skills and things that you sort of kind of do while you're getting your certification here, these are areas to be really, really focusing on. And then this is a little tactical for once as soon as you have landed, intentionally building and amplifying your personal brand. What do you want to be known for? That happens to start on the day you start your new role. As a matter of fact, if you do some things ahead of time, it can be forecasted ahead of what are you known for? When you're not in the room, what are they saying about you? And then learning how to not just hone that brand, but how to amplify that brand. Identifying and building your internal allies. What I like to call it are the proxies for you that are in meetings that you're not in, that can come out and tell you, listen, what I just heard, you better have some wind under your wings. This is what's going to be going on over there. I literally had somebody who saved after just 90 days, they did a reorg, and we had found our ally in the beginning. That person was in a meeting. They were ready to cut Bob. And they said, well, last in, first out, we're reorganizing. He said, no. We have waited 12 years to find somebody with his exact technical expertise. This is not the time to jettison that person. Somebody else got axed instead of him, only because he had an ally in that meeting, right? Continuous curation of recruiters. Even when you land, it doesn't matter how happy you are. It doesn't matter how great you're doing. Recruiters need to be able to find you. You don't have to say yes to everything that they bring you, but recruiters can bring you, everyone in Platinum Resources for sure can bring you a little bit of a forecast about what's trending out there, what's the compensation trends out there. They can be your absolute friend, and my favorite networking book is Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Most people don't talk to a recruiter until they're in transition and desperate for a job. You need to curate just the connectivity, just connecting to them, becoming a first level connection I have a whole strategy around that. You can actually, if you go to my website, you can download the bulletproofrecruiting.com and get a couple of documents on this. But just by connecting to recruiters, you amplify your visibility all across LinkedIn. Continuous creation of a network for today, the network that you'll need for tomorrow, and the network that you'll need for beyond. That's got to know what's forecasted, know where things are going, and then make sure you're connecting with the leaders and the thought leaders where things are trending, and then strategically leveraging LinkedIn. I've been teaching LinkedIn since 2005, and what I said back in 2005 is still the case today. Most people use LinkedIn to the equivalent of as if you had a cell phone and only used it, or an iPhone and only used it to make phone calls. That's how people use LinkedIn. And yet it's the best platform for leveraging your brand, right? And I want you to remember this. This is where so many people are. You will be imprisoned in a room with a door that's unlocked and opens inward, as long as it does not occur to you to pull rather than push. And too many people are locked in a room and locked inside of a career and locked inside of no opportunities and no options because they're not looking outside of that room. And here it is. It's not you. The world has changed, but it is up to you. You need to be sure your loyalty is to yourself, to your lifetime legacy, and to those who count on you. Thank you. I hope that I've scared you just a little bit so that I can get you in action.
This is amazing, Pat. I can't even believe how many pearls you dropped, and it's incredible. And your Bulletproof course, I think, is could be a game changer for many. So if you we'll send out a link to your Bulletproof course. We'll send out a link to any of the materials that you give us, and we'll make that happen. We have just about 10 minutes for questions. Who has a question for Pat? Let's leverage her time right now. We got access to her. Unmute yourself and feel free.
Hey, Patricia.
Yes. Hi, Pat. I attend your Bulletproof sessions, but I haven't attended all the time. And I know you have a special one on recruiting, but like, what is your suggestion for us to reach out to growing our LinkedIn network?
Well, thank you for that, because everybody can benefit from this. And I'm going to give you a little snapshot. So seriously, I can put the documents in the Dropbox I'm going to create for you, or give you that resource. But you really can go to bulletproofrecruiting.com, and there's a form to fill out, and you'll get 2 documents. It says one, but there's a secret one that comes behind it. You know how you do that. So the first one is the step-by-step becoming a first level connection. The second one is Recruiters 101. So it's a little bit, I was one. So I was a psychology major and a recruiter. So a lot of that comes out in those 2 documents. So you will see, but the major thing is most people they wait till they're in transition, and then they're calling recruiters and saying, hey, I want to talk to you. I'm fabulous. You need to know me. And a recruiter is very anxious to do that, but they have 2 jobs to do every day when they get up. You guys have a business development group, but most recruiters don't. And retained recruiters seldom really have very big or robust business development. They're the hunter, the seeker, and the doer, right? And so they have 2 jobs to do: fill the searches that they've been retained for, and go sell the next search. So when you call up and you're the best CFO in the world, but they don't have a CFO search, there is not a thing they can do for you. Nothing. And if you keep calling them and say, well, just give me 10 minutes, you do that all day, add the numbers up. If 120 people call you in a week, you kind of lost your week, right? So I tested this, and it does work. You'll see in the document, it works like a charm. If you become a first level connection to a recruiter, then when they go to do a search that has the criteria that matches you, when they have a project and they go to do that search, you will come up first in the search results. It's just the way LinkedIn does it. First level connections come in first. Why does it matter that you come in first? It matters because if I'm doing a search and I put in my criteria and I get 700 candidates, which could be, there's 750 million people on there. I get 700 candidates. Now I go through, and I can tell you from my practice, if I was going to do a search, I needed to present 3 to 5 finalists to my client. That's the way retained works, right? Well, I figured out over quickly, fast learner, that I needed about maybe 80 candidates to start with in order to get those 3 to 5 that I'm going to present. And the only reason I needed 80, by the way, is for a crazy reason. It's because 50% of the people that I reached out to and said, hey, I'm a recruiter, I have a great opportunity, I'd like to talk to you, 50% completely ignored me. They would often come back 2 years later when they needed me, but they didn't accept my invitation. And I always just said, it's just an exploration. It's not a gun to your head, right? So now I'm down, if I started with 80, I'm down to 40. If I'm down to 40, I rule people out, and then I get down to my 3 to 5. Now, here's the thing to know. If I get 700 results, LinkedIn's pretty good about how it brings me up what I've asked for. So I maybe only have to look at 90 to 100 profiles to get those 80 that I'm going to go and screen through and reach out to. So if let's say I get to number 92 and I have found enough candidates for my search and you're number 93, I'm not going to see you. You could be better than the ones I have. You could be equal to the ones I have, but I am not going to see you because I got to get busy and screen these candidates and produce results for my clients. So I want you to be on one of the first, second, or third pages so that you will be able to be seen. And what that document does is tell you 2 things: exactly how to find the right recruiters, because they work predominantly, especially in retained, that predominantly work by industry category. They do have CFO specialty or HR specialty, but predominantly by industry. And on page 14 of the document is the exact wording that I recommend that you use to reach out to them. And remember, I was a psychology major, never decided to do that, a psychology major and a recruiter. So the language on that document is page 14 is meant to get the recruiter's attention. Now, let me tell you the bonus of that strategy. The bonus of the strategy is that when LinkedIn sees you connecting to connectors, and recruiters are connectors, we all have a lot of people in our network. LinkedIn, alarm bell rings, because LinkedIn's in the business of selling advertising. And the more people they can say, our people have an average of X number of connections, and they have this much activity, and they have all these statistics to say we are a robust platform. They love connectors because connectors drive the robustness of LinkedIn. So when you connect with a recruiter, especially when you connect with quite a few, so your numbers go up, you start to get tremendous visibility. You'll start to see your views go up tremendously when you do that. As I was saying that this works, I have a client who started her CEO role on Monday. She had never been a CEO, but she had everything lined up. Was right for the industry. She did this recruiter strategy, and the next week, does not usually happen this fast, she was in play for this CEO role, and she started on Monday, right? So, and I have others who did this, but the visibility came, they got called by another recruiter because that first connection elevated that connectivity. So it's super simple. It's simple to do, and it's something that I make my people do all the time. And I want to tell you something. There are, Lord knows, y'all at Platinum probably knows, there are 1.9 million recruiters on LinkedIn. The last time I did the search, 1.9 million. The average retained recruiter only does about 10 searches a year. I know everybody thinks they do a gazillion, but they don't. The Korn Ferries and the publicly traded companies, those people maybe do 20 to 25 with their team, et cetera. But the single shingle like I was and the boutique consultants, they don't do that many. So it's 1.9 million and 10. And you don't have to be a numbers person to know that it's a numbers game. It's that simple, right? So I hope that helps.
Julia.
Morning. So I've landed, but following your advice, I'm always just trying to be bulletproof. Who are the most strategic people that I should be connecting with and talking to, even though I'm happy in my position currently?
It really depends. You have to have a whole plan, right? So it depends upon, first of all, for sure, recruiters, because you want to stay on their radar and you want to stay highly visible, because you're going to be, if you're really bulletproofing, you're building your brand, and the higher visibility and views you have, the more that's going to work. So that's number one, of course. Who else is people inside the company? So your first 90 days, you build that constituency inside the company? Who are the movers and the shakers? Who are the influencers? Who are the proxies that will be in those meetings? And then first starting very close and then constantly stretching yourself and saying, oh, I don't know anybody in that division, that department. So constantly looking for that. On the outside, you want to be expanding your network into, so I'll give you a good example. I have several clients who landed but their Google was, like everybody else, Google was their number one company. And I said, okay, well, you landed now. Let's really dig into connecting to people in Google. And 6 months later, 2 of them are getting calls from internal recruiters at Google because they've expanded and grown that network. So who you connect to is strategic to where you want to be next, where your skills are going to be most appreciated next. And it could be also people, if you want to be on panels, one of the things you want to be doing is if you post an article, I'll give you an idea, you post an article and it's written by a freelance writer. I always have my people post the article and then try to connect with the freelance writer. And guess what happens? Sometimes they are called upon for a quote for the next article, right? So they take that, oh, this is somebody who specializes in this topic. I'm an expert in that topic. I share the article. I give them something. I pay it forward. I send them a LinkedIn connection. I invite them to jump on a call. Next thing you know, I have a soundbite in the next article, so I have visibility. So that's a really strategic. It's peeling an onion to get very strategic about that.
Awesome. Chris Hickey.
Hi, Chris. Very grateful to be on this call. Thanks so much, Patricia, for that.
Yeah.
I love your insight. So yeah, I can really appreciate it. I've worked for IBM, Dun & Bradstreet, Siemens, CSC Consulting, and a handful of other large and mid-sized organizations, and I feel like I've seen it all. But anyhow, my question is, I get these flyer requests from recruiters, and I'm of the opinion that I need to weed through that noise. That's my knee-jerk reaction. I get these requests. You're ideal for this position that we have. It pays a tremendous amount of money, and we want to talk to you. Please send me your resume. To me, it just seems like somebody's fishing to fill up that 80 number slot. And that's not where I want to be with some recruiter I've never met that's usually has 2 years of experience and is just trying to build up their book. So how do I filter that out?
Red flag. Anybody knows red flag. Send me your resume. Happy to send it. Send me your job description.
Okay.
If they're fishing, they don't have a job description, right?
Right.
I would err on the side of, again, depending upon so there are, we know it's, I talk about in the one-on-one, all the folks on this sponsoring this know there's contingent recruiters and there's retained recruiters. If a retained recruiter reaches out, they are not fishing, and they have one assignment. And when they say, they won't even say, I'd like to get your resume. I can tell you that they want to get on a call. They want to know a little bit about you. And I will tell you, once in a while, I've had recently a couple of retained recruiters say, well, we haven't got the job description created yet. I still tell my clients, when you have the job description, please send it to me. Like, that's only a fair trade, right? So that's the best way. In the Recruiter 101 document that's included, there's quite a bit on this whole
Okay.
stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, last question, Valerie.
Thank you for having this chat. I actually heard about you from a fellow boot camper who used to go to your seminar, Claudia. She was like obsessed with it. So when I saw this pop up, I definitely wanted to join. So something you said really resonated with me. Actually, a lot of what you said, because I'm technically a gig worker and I've done the boot camp. It's been really interesting to try to transition into full-time roles, because a lot of the experience I have been in production companies where that dynamic you're describing of like be known, be really vocal, get the stuff done, like network while you're on the job for your next job is all sort of what's like landed me future roles. Mm-hmm. And I found that like at the times when I've gone into more typical like Fortune 500 publicly traded companies, like doing that kind of made me stand out, but like I didn't really feel like good about it because there's a totally different culture. And I actually started buying these books on EQ describing like don't talk, like be much more perceptive to what the culture is. And so I feel like I actually have been trying to go the other way from the stuff you're describing. And I'm wondering if there's like a way that you can strategically do some of these things that don't really fit in that corporate environment, but in a way that's like appreciated and like people enjoy it rather than be like, oh, who does she think she is kind of.
I'm going to tell you what I think doesn't fit in the corporate culture. I think your authentic self doesn't fit in that culture, and you shouldn't be becoming, making a very knee jerk, I wouldn't say, but when I hear you, it's like to go, if you're a gigger and you like being nimble, find a company that likes nimble people. They're going to be smaller. They're going to be more mid-sized. They're going to love all of that. They're not going to worry about that. You go into Procter & Gamble. Yeah. They have a curriculum for their leaders that is very clear. There's nothing more important for anybody in the world, but anybody on this call and anybody in when you're interviewing, when you're networking, when you're starting a new role, than to be authentic. Authenticity is your superpower, is authenticity. No one is more powerful than you when you're being authentic, and nobody is weaker than you when you are not being authentic. So you can go in there and you can read all the books you want, and you can get very meek and mild, and you can whisper about how good you are, but you're never going to be happy, and it's not your authentic self. And you need to find someplace where you can amplify who you are in an environment that rewards that instead of punishes it. That's really the solution.
Okay. That's a good answer.
With that, you guys, any other questions you may have, reach out to Pat directly, and we're going to send out our stuff. Thank you, Pat, from the bottom of my heart. I am so grateful that you came on. And
I just want to shout one thing quick. I'm going to send you a link for. I have it's closing on Tuesday, I think. I'm doing a live, not a live, but a course. I took my book and hired a course creator, and we created a course for the book. So I want to be sure that I send you that link. Because that will be expiring. It's a cohort, and it closes on May 4th, I think. So
yeah, and it starts on Sunday. I read that it starts on Sunday. So please send out whatever you can to us, and we'll make sure it gets out to the group. And thank you, Pat. It's just been amazing.
Great to see you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And Pat, will you come back again?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, it's great. Tenny, I'll reconnect with you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
So, Christy, you're going to send us all the documentation?
Yep, we sure will.
You are super fantastic.
He was
fabulous.
Great. I have been so excited to have Pat, and man, she's doing a great job.
Yeah, she gets it.
She does. She does. I'm telling you, I want to be Pat in another life. It's like her mind is so quick, and she's doing great stuff. Okay, I got to jump on another call, everyone. And
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.